Three, two, one. Man walks into a bar with a roll of tarmac under his arm, and he says, "One beer, please, barman, and one for the road." I'm not even sorry. I'm not even sorry. Brothers, sisters, comrades, and friends, welcome to Bat Country. Oh, let's just go. Let's just say words. Alcoholism is the only medical condition you can have where people will be mad at you for having it. That's paraphrasing the late great scientist Dr. Mitch Hedberg. And he's right. Regardless of whether you personally consider alcoholism to be a disease or not, people generally don't have much patience for people with alcohol use disorders. Doctors will treat you last when it's busy. Even tattooists will be angry at you if you're drinking the night before because it thins your blood and makes you bleed more. Whatever the reason, whoever it is you're confronted with, alcoholics are third-class citizens when we are actively drinking. I think a few of you, as I said that, may have just checked in with yourself to see if you personally have any sympathy with that position. Perhaps when I said doctors treat alcoholics last, even if you are in recovery, you might have had a little invasive thought. A thought may have flashed across your mind for a moment, something along the lines of, yes, well, alcoholism is a disease with genetic components, but sometimes drunks deserve some of their own misfortune. And I know that some of you must have considered that just for a moment, because I do that too. I have nearly 40 years of socio-cultural conditioning which has trained me to see alcoholics as victims of their own behaviour. That social conditioning has influenced even me to think that an alcoholic occasionally, at least partially, deserves some of their own misfortunes. I mean, I am one of those people. I have suffered those misfortunes. And I also do believe that alcoholism is a disease with genetic and environmental factors. And yet, even I can't shake off that reaction some of the time. Why? And I can sense through this little YouTube window that we're looking at each other through that you might be expecting this video to be about me trying to change society's perception of alcoholics and to attack the stigma behind our collective perceptions of alcoholism as a moral failing rather than a disease. This video might have the vibe that I am out to confront and challenge conventional wisdom and to enlighten the population that alcoholism is a disease and it should be treated with the same dignity and respect as appendicitis or osteoporosis. Don't worry, that is not my intention. I'm not on a crusade, and that's not what I'm here to do. Instead, I'm here to reflect on that attitude, the one that confronts me with the knowledge that perhaps I don't even have enough sympathy with people in my own position. Today, I want to talk about something that's been on my mind for a while. It's a question, and it's this. Why does a tiny little bit of me, an alcoholic, think that in some cases alcoholics might deserve some of their misfortune? Where does that come from? Why would someone like me, an alcoholic in recovery, who has no great spirituality about them, still have a kind of underlying sense that alcoholism is a moral weakness? I think it's a good question. Why do rational people believe that alcohol is a moral failing? And it's a good question because there is an answer. So let's take a look at it. Spoiler, it's religion. So the obvious question starting a topic like this is, what is morality? If alcoholism is a moral failing and we want to explore that, don't we first have to define what morality is? Well, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to spend too much time defining morality or trying to find where the edges of what is moral and what is not. I don't think it's necessary. And I know that that should be important in a video like this one. But I also feel like it would be a waste of all of our time to have a semantic debate about the philosophical principles of morality. What is morality? I'm just going to go ahead and credit all of us, me and you watching this, with enough intelligence to understand that when I say a moral weakness or a moral failing, we all roughly know what we're talking about. And then we can all kind of meet it on those terms, even if we haven't defined those terms particularly well. Is that fair? I think that's fair. The best way to consider morality for the sake of this conversation is not to try to define morality on its own terms, but instead define it against its opposition. So, is alcoholism a disease, or is it a choice? Now, the actual consensus, the jury is still out on whether alcoholism constitutes a disease by any traditional definition of the word. The general consensus is that it does qualify as a disease, but you'll hear arguments equally powerful from both sides. But in reading the literature, the scientific literature, I have the feeling that that conclusion, that it is a disease, it qualifies as a disease, is a product of contemporary culture rather than actual diagnosis. It's more compassionate to categorize alcoholism as a disease, and that is in line with our kind of more sensitive culture right now. But while the jury is out on whether or not alcoholism is a true disease, the door is left open for the possibility that it is a choice. And with that possibility comes a great deal of stigma. Just the idea that it could be a choice brings with it a huge amount of invective and prejudice. And just in case I sound like I'm being vague and I'm deflecting and playing both sides a little bit, let me tell you my own position up front before we get into the heavier detail. I don't believe alcoholism is a choice, nor do I think it is a moral weakness. But I'm also not convinced that it's a disease either. I feel like that opinion is going to draw ire. It's going to make me unpopular. And I'm ready to be proven wrong. But I'm not convinced it's a disease, and I absolutely reject the idea that we are powerless over it. I trust the science. There are genetic influences on addiction and alcoholism, and I believe that some people are more predisposed to alcoholism than other people by birth. However, I also believe in the positive force of personal responsibility, by which I mean this. Alcoholism is not a choice. However, I have chosen not to drink today. Do you see the difference? Do you see the subtext? Anyway, whatever your interpretation of alcoholism, it's worth remembering that your interpretation is inescapably a product of the time in which you are having it. The mood of the culture in which you live is woven into your interpretation of social issues like alcoholism. It's inevitable. For the last century or two, we've been in an era which has put great importance and great emphasis on individuality, on personhood, and certainly on personal freedom And that has been a threat to more conservative and traditional perspectives in general. Not just talking about alcoholism here, I'm talking very broadly. And right now, we're in a kind of cultural, gentle parenting, soft parenting, but society-wide, with an emphasis on empathy and respect and personal choice and emotional intelligence. Emotionality, essentially. Right now, in the year of our Lord 2024, feelings are often more powerful than facts. And that is the lens through which we are collectively interpreting conditions like alcoholism. Not as internal failings, but external pressures. I feel like my drinking is not my choice. I feel like I am powerless over alcohol. So that's today. But the idea that alcoholism is a moral weakness is itself a hangover from a previous era of social thought. That is an era which was less focused on the individual and more focused on the community. A more religious time in which morality was understood by its impact on the community rather than on a person. A lot of Judeo-Christian moral teaching, for example, focuses on how an individual's behavior impacts that individual's community. Things that impact the community positively are moral behaviors. Things that impact that community negatively are immoral behaviors. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven images, or thou shalt not worship false idols. You shall have no other gods before me. Why? Because to do so would be to divide a community at a time when it was already very vulnerable. At that time, the ancient Israelites really required a singularity of purpose for the survival of their vulnerable nation. Idol worship would have a negative impact on the community, and therefore it is immoral. That's why. So even the simple ones, thou shalt not kill, for example, thou do no murder. Murder is bad for communities. It's not about a personal injustice. It's that murder is bad for the society. Same as theft. Theft, thou shalt not steal. Why? Because theft creates an inequality within a community. And so on. A lot of ancient, or at least Bronze Age kind of lawmaking can be interpreted in those ways. How to behave for the benefit and stability of the wider community. Things that promoted stability, as I said, were moral, and things that did not were immoral. That has changed over time. As we've become more individualistic, as organized religion has been de-emphasized, that need for protecting the community has also been de-emphasized. And for reasons too tangential and too dense to explore right now, it was the Industrial Revolution that caused a kind of upending of that order, a cultural shift away from the belief in community towards a belief in the individual. It's all a product of the Industrial Revolution, and we're still wrestling with it today. This isn't me just theorizing, there is literature behind this, I promise. And what it means for this conversation, though, to bring it back to the topic at hand, centuries of communal moral teaching had enshrined in our ancestors the notion that our very lives are a gift from God, literally a gift from God, and that we are duty bound, we are obligated, divinely mandated to protect this gift that we have been given. God had created this reality for us and had made it perfect and handed it to us to enjoy, and to reject that to reject that gift, say through suicide or through alcoholism, is a sin against God. Drunkenness was for centuries punished not for the drunkenness itself, but as an abuse of a God-given gift, a rejection of a divine mandate. That is why alcoholism is seen today as a moral weakness. It is a rejection of God. And that's kind of demonstrated by a relatively straightforward fact. Think about this. Throughout history, alcoholism has not been blamed on the alcohol in exactly the same way that food is never blamed for gluttony. The glutton is the sinner, and the alcoholic is morally weak. Gluttony is a moral weakness and therefore sinful, and the same is true of alcohol. As God has been de-emphasized in favor of technology, the way that we conceptualize things like alcoholism has also evolved. And for those of us who don't have God in our lives, we found it easy to reject the idea of alcoholism as a moral failing, because without the God part, there can't be a sin part. Like, the moral part has no foundation without the presence of an all-powerful God. I think that's why God is so successful in Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's easy for lefty, woke, snowflakey types like me to scoff at that kind of medieval moral proselytization. But today, all we've done, people like me, all we've done is made a hole where moral weakness used to be, and instead we have filled it with, I don't know, mindfulness podcasts. I don't know, you tell me. What did we replace God with? What did we replace the idea of a moral weakness? Centuries of religious moral thinking has left us with moral withdrawal syndrome, and there are no cultural benzodiazepines to help us shake it off. Now, I can readily acknowledge that I don't agree with society's perspective and suspicion that alcoholism is a moral failing. I don't agree with that. But as you can probably tell, I have a hard time trying to explain why. After all, I was raised in a society, and society's stigmas are as alive in me as they are in everyone else. And if you can explain any of this better than I can, please do so in the comments, because if I ever did have a point when I started recording this, I have forgotten what it is. But I am sure that some of you have opinions that you'd be happy to share, so please do. Please dig me out of this hole I've dug for myself. So, thank you for watching, and as always, good luck out there.